On a calm night in April 2008, 20-year-old Rachel Monroe, a promising marine biology student, left her shift at a coffee shop in Clearwater, Florida. The night was serene, the kind of evening where the sky hangs dark and quiet, with only the sound of distant waves. But Rachel's life, her future, was about to be ripped away in an instant. By morning she was gone, vanished without a trace. All that remained were her keys still in the ignition, her bag untouched, and a bloody piece of torn clothing in the sand. A peaceful town, known for its serene beaches, would soon find itself at the heart of a mystery that would haunt it for 15 years. What happened that night would break the Monroe family's heart. It would shatter the peace of Clearwater, turning it from a picturesque coastal town to a place filled with fear and uncertainty. A small, tight-knit community now forced to grapple with the unfathomable. The sudden, violent disappearance of a bright young woman. The search for answers would take years, leaving Rachel's parents, friends, and the entire town looking for justice. But as the years passed, the hope of finding her alive began to fade, and Rachel's name, once spoken in daily conversation, became just another memory. Until one day, a piece of DNA would uncover a truth no one could have ever imagined. This wasn't just another missing person case. This was something darker, something much more sinister. What had really happened to Rachel Monroe? And why would she be taken from a place she loved? Before I begin, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments below. I'd love to know just how far this story is reaching. Stay tuned as we step back in time to unravel the chilling events that forever changed Clearwater, Florida. Clearwater, Florida. It was a place that seemed almost too perfect, a peaceful coastal city that many dreamt of calling home. The sun-kissed beaches stretched for miles, and the quaint streets were lined with small, charming shops. In the daytime, the city buzzed with tourists soaking up the sun, but when night fell, the streets emptied. The sound of the ocean breeze whispered through the palm trees, a soft lullaby for the town's residents. It was a quiet place, one that promised safety and tranquility, where the worst that could happen was a sunburn or a missed opportunity for dinner at the beachside cafe. But on April 12, 2008, the darkness brought with it something unimaginable, a nightmare that would change Clearwater forever. Rachel Monroe was more than just a marine biology student at the University of South Florida. She was the embodiment of hope and ambition. At 20 years old, she had already charted a course to make a difference in the world, driven by a love for the ocean and its creatures. Her dream: to study sea turtles and contribute to marine conservation efforts that would protect them for future generations. Her passion for her field was contagious, and it wasn't just her peers and professors who admired her. Everyone who met Rachel felt drawn to her warmth and positivity. She was known for her radiant smile, a smile that could light up even the dreariest of rooms. But beyond that, Rachel was someone who truly cared, whether it was for the ocean, the people in her life, or the animal she studied. She was someone everyone in Clearwater could count on. But even in the most peaceful of towns, danger can lurk, and that night, Rachel's world would collide with an unseen darkness. But like anyone, Rachel had her struggles. There were complications beneath the surface, tensions no one had expected. Just weeks before her disappearance, Rachel had broken up with her ex-boyfriend Ethan Clark. To outsiders, their relationship had seemed perfect. They'd been together for over a year, their love apparent to anyone who saw them. But as Rachel's friends and family later learned, things weren't so simple. The breakup had been messy, filled with misunderstandings, jealousy, and unspoken emotions. Some of Rachel's closest friends would later tell investigators that Ethan had never fully accepted the end of their relationship. And while he claimed to have moved on, the cracks in their relationship and the anger that lingered beneath it all pointed to something darker. Could this tension have played a role in Rachel's disappearance? Was Ethan just an ex-boyfriend with unresolved feelings, or did the breakup set something darker into motion? Rachel's routine that night seemed no different from any other. After leaving her shift at the small coffee shop in Clearwater, she drove her silver sedan to Honeymoon Island, a place she often retreated to when she needed peace. It was where she found solace, where she could listen to the waves crash against the shore and allow her mind to wander. She went there to breathe, to think about her research and her dreams for the future. She parked her car, grabbed her canvas bag, and walked toward the familiar sandy path that led to the beach. But what happened after that? No one knew. The last image of Rachel that night was etched in the minds of those who had seen her leave her job, radiant, smiling, and full of life. But the following morning, everything changed. Rachel never made it back to her dorm. Her seat in class was empty. Her phone remained silent, her dorm room untouched. By noon, her friends and family had already begun to fear the worst. What had happened on Honeymoon Island that night? Rachel's disappearance would be the beginning of a tragedy that no one in Clearwater was prepared for. Before we continue, I just want to take a moment to thank all my amazing subscribers for supporting this channel and helping it grow. These stories take a lot of time and effort to produce, and your continued support means the world. If you're finding this story as chilling and captivating as I am, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the incredible true crime stories that are coming your way. And hey, if you know someone who still believes in the power of justice, share this story with them. Let's keep the conversation going and raise awareness together. Thank you for being here, and let's dive right back in. As we dive deeper into the investigation, things are about to take a turn that no one could have expected. The search for Rachel Monroe would uncover more than just a missing person case. It would reveal a disturbing truth that no one could have imagined. The pieces were slowly coming together, but there were still so many questions left unanswered. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. 16 long years had passed since Rachel Monroe disappeared, and with every passing day, the case had slowly drifted into the abyss of cold cases. The Monroe family had lived with the unbearable uncertainty, clinging to memories of a daughter who was taken too soon. But then, after all this time, a fresh set of eyes would finally take a long, hard look at Rachel's case. Detective Sarah Mitchell, a seasoned investigator with the Clearwater Cold Case Unit, was assigned the task of reopening the investigation. Her reputation for solving complex cases preceded her, and her determination was undeniable. As she sat in her small office, sifting through the worn case files, she knew one thing: this would be anything but easy. But Sarah wasn't one to shy away from a challenge. She was committed to finding the truth, no matter how long it took or where it led. As Sarah meticulously combed through the evidence and police reports from the original investigation, one detail stood out, something that had been overlooked all those years ago. It was a small clue, buried deep within the case file, almost easy to miss. A torn pair of jeans, stained with blood, had been found near the beach parking lot. At the time, it had seemed like just another piece of clothing discarded in haste, but Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she examined it again. This seemingly insignificant piece of evidence would turn out to be the key to unraveling the mystery. It was the first real lead in years, the one that could finally point the investigation in the right direction. Back in 2008, DNA testing was still in its infancy. Forensic technology wasn't as advanced as it is today, and the evidence from that night hadn't been enough to make a match. The technology simply wasn't there to connect the dots. But now, in 2023, things had changed. New advancements in genetic genealogy had revolutionized cold case investigations, giving hope to families like the Monroes who had long given up on ever getting answers. Sarah knew this was the breakthrough she had been waiting for. The evidence from the torn jeans, once dismissed as a lead too faint to follow, could now be analyzed with the latest technology, offering the possibility of a match. The hope of finding a killer who had eluded justice for over a decade was finally within reach. And then the breakthrough came. Through genetic testing, the DNA found on the torn jeans matched a man named Mark Doyle. A quiet, reclusive figure, Mark had lived just 2 blocks away from the Monroes at the time of Rachel's disappearance. He was a man who had kept to himself, a freelance air conditioner repairman with few close friends. His name hadn't appeared on anyone's radar back in 2008. He wasn't part of Rachel's social circle, nor did he have any criminal history. But what made this discovery even more chilling was that Mark Doyle had been a part of the search efforts after Rachel went missing. He had even joined the community during the vigils, offering support to the grieving family. He had been there, standing alongside the Monroes, a face among the crowd, pretending to be just another concerned neighbor. But now, after all these years, the truth began to surface. Mark Doyle, the man who had offered his help, was now the prime suspect in Rachel Monroe's murder. Could Mark Doyle, the seemingly harmless neighbor who had volunteered in the search for Rachel, really be the killer? The thought was almost too disturbing to process. How could someone who had been part of the community, someone who had helped in the search for Rachel, be capable of such a horrifying crime? The truth was finally coming to light, but it was a truth that no one could have ever imagined. Rachel Monroe's killer wasn't a stranger or an outsider. It was someone who had lived right next door, someone who had shared the same small town, someone who had even stood beside the grieving family during their darkest hours. The chilling truth was about to be uncovered, and Clearwater would never be the same again. The investigation took a disturbing turn when Mark Doyle's DNA was definitively linked to the crime scene. For years, this quiet man had remained in the background, just another seemingly ordinary neighbor in Clearwater. But now the unthinkable truth was emerging. He wasn't just a neighbor. He was the man who had murdered Rachel Monroe. It was a revelation that sent shockwaves through the entire community. Mark Doyle wasn't just an innocent bystander or a person who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. No, he was the one who had taken Rachel's life, violently and without remorse. The man who had lived just 2 blocks away from the Monroe family, the man who had offered his help during the search, the man who had joined the vigils and passed out flyers. This was the man responsible for her disappearance. But what made this revelation even more horrifying was the betrayal that followed it. Mark Doyle wasn't just some faceless figure in the investigation. He had been involved, deeply involved, in the search for Rachel. He had stood beside the Monroe family, offering condolences, sharing in their grief. He had helped hand out flyers, asking for the community's help in finding Rachel. To Rachel's parents, Linda and Daniel, it felt like a cruel joke. How could the person they had trusted, the person they had thanked for his help, be the one who had stolen their daughter from them? This wasn't some stranger who had come from far away. This was someone they knew, someone who had earned their trust, someone who had even shared in their pain. The fact that the person who had perpetrated this horrible crime was someone who had been part of the search, someone who had comforted them, promised them they would find Rachel, made the reality even more nightmarish. How could this man, who had shown such kindness, be the one to have ended their daughter's life? Mark's confession was chilling in its coldness. There was no remorse, no guilt, just a flat, emotionless recount of the events that transpired on the night of April 12, 2008. Mark admitted to confronting Rachel on that fateful night. What started as a casual encounter quickly escalated when Rachel rejected his advances. In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Mark attacked Rachel. He strangled her, his hands wrapped tightly around her neck as she fought to escape, her cries for help drowned out by the anger burning within him. And when Rachel finally went limp, when her struggles stopped and her life was extinguished in a moment of blind fury, Mark simply moved on. He dragged her lifeless body into the bushes and discarded it like an object, as if she had never mattered at all. But Mark didn't stop there. He didn't just leave her body behind. No, he staged the entire scene. He left her car parked with the keys in the ignition, hoping it would confuse the investigators. It was all part of his plan to make it seem like Rachel had simply stepped out, an attempt to buy himself more time and divert suspicion away from him. This cold, calculated act of deception was as chilling as the murder itself. Mark had been so meticulous, so careful in how he manipulated the scene, trying to make it look like Rachel had just walked away from her life, never to return. But what Mark didn't count on was that the truth would eventually come to light, and the lies he had crafted would come undone. For Rachel's parents, Linda and Daniel, the truth came crashing down like a ton of bricks. They had spent 16 long years in limbo, desperately searching for answers, hoping for a resolution that would bring them peace. And now, finally, they had it. But the answer was the last thing they could have ever imagined. The man they had trusted, the man who had helped search for their daughter, the man who had comforted them during their darkest hours, He was the one who had taken their child's life. It was a betrayal so deep, so personal, that it left them numb with disbelief. How could someone, let alone a neighbor they had trusted so completely, do something so monstrous? How could they have been so blind, so completely deceived by a man who had so easily played the part of the concerned neighbor? This revelation wasn't just about finding the truth. It was about understanding the magnitude of the loss, the depth of the pain. For Linda and Daniel, the nightmare that had started with their daughter's disappearance had only grown worse with this revelation. They hadn't just lost Rachel. They had been deceived by the person who took her from them. Imagine being in Rachel's parents' shoes. After 16 long years of searching, of hoping, and of clinging to the hope that their daughter would one day come home, they finally get the answer. But that answer doesn't bring them closure. It doesn't bring them peace. Instead, it brings a brutal, painful truth. The person responsible for their daughter's death wasn't a stranger. It wasn't someone who had snatched her away from a distance. It was someone they had known, someone who had been there when they needed help, someone who had comforted them. How would you feel? How could you reconcile the betrayal of someone you trusted, someone who had been there when your heart was breaking, being the very one who caused your greatest pain? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. How would you handle such a devastating betrayal? It was July 14, 2023, when the Clearwater police finally made their move. The day started like any other, but by the time the sun dipped low on the horizon, everything had changed. Mark Doyle, the man who had once been a familiar face in the neighborhood, was arrested at his home. There was no dramatic confrontation, no struggle. Just a quiet, almost eerie calmness in the air as Mark Doyle was led away in handcuffs. His face remained emotionless, a blank mask of indifference as the officers guided him through the front door of his small rented house, the same house where, just a few weeks prior, he had been living his life as if nothing had ever happened. The community watched in stunned silence. Clearwater, a place known for its laid-back charm, had never seen anything like this. Neighbors peered out of their windows, trying to make sense of what was unfolding before their eyes. The man who had once helped search for Rachel, who had offered a shoulder to cry on, was now being escorted away as the prime suspect in her murder. How could this be? How could the killer have been hiding in plain sight for so long? The answer, however, was simple. The man who stood before them wasn't just their neighbor. He was a monster, a predator who had taken the life of a young woman with everything to live for, someone they had trusted. For the Monroe family, the arrest was a strange mixture of relief and devastation. After 16 years of searching, of hoping, of endlessly questioning what happened to Rachel, they finally had their answers. The uncertainty, the sleepless nights, the countless hours spent trying to piece together the mystery. All of it came to an end that day. But the relief was bittersweet. Learning the truth about Mark Doyle, the man who had comforted them during their darkest hours, the man who had searched alongside them, left the Monroe family broken in ways they could never have imagined. Their pain was no longer just the loss of their daughter. It was the crushing realization that someone they had trusted had taken her life. Linda Monroe sat in silence that day, her hands clasped together tightly as she tried to hold onto any semblance of composure. Her mind raced, replaying every moment she had shared with Mark, every time he had offered a kind word or a comforting gesture. She thought back to the vigils, the searches, how she had thanked him for his help, never knowing he was the very person responsible for her daughter's disappearance. Daniel Monroe, ever the stoic man, couldn't hide his emotion. He clenched his fists as the news hit him. A mixture of rage, grief, and disbelief flooded his heart. The anger he had carried for years, the need to know what had happened to Rachel, surged to the surface. But it wasn't a moment of catharsis. No, this was a raw, bitter truth that left him hollow inside. For the Monroes, this arrest didn't bring them peace. It simply brought them more pain, more suffering. They had been searching for so long that the truth felt like a dagger in their hearts. As the news spread across Clearwater, the community was left reeling. What had once been a peaceful town, known for its sun-kissed beaches and friendly neighbors, was now a place marked by betrayal and horror. How could this have happened? How could a man so well integrated into the community, someone who had volunteered his time and energy in the search for Rachel, be the one who had taken her life? The answer was painfully clear, though no one could fully comprehend it. Clearwater, like so many small towns, had always trusted its own. They believed that their neighbors were safe, that the people they interacted with every day were just like them. Good, decent people. But now that trust had been shattered. People began to question everything. Who else might be hiding a dark secret? Could they ever truly know the people they lived next door to? Could Rachel's death have been avoided if they had known the truth sooner? Questions lingered, and the answers were elusive. Even in the face of such tragedy, there were those who refused to believe it. Some defended Mark, unable to reconcile the man they knew with the monster he had become. But for many others, the shock was too great to bear. The realization that someone had been living among them, hiding in plain sight, was a hard truth to accept. A neighborhood that once felt like a safe haven had now been tainted with suspicion and fear. As Mark Doyle was led away, the town of Clearwater would never be the same. The trust they had once placed in their neighbors was forever fractured, and the community would always carry the scar of Rachel's death and the betrayal that followed. This arrest has turned Clearwater upside down, and as the community processes the enormity of what has happened, we want to hear from you. How do you think the people of Clearwater will cope with this shocking revelation? And for the Monroe family, what does justice mean to them now? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Before we move forward, if you're feeling the weight of this story like we are, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more updates on Rachel's case and other chilling true crime mysteries. And be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. The courtroom was packed. A sea of faces, each one waiting for the final verdict in the case that had captivated Clearwater for 15 years. The air was thick with tension, anticipation hanging over the room like a dark cloud. On one side, Mark Doyle sat, his face expressionless, his cold eyes staring ahead, as if he were in a place far removed from the storm that surrounded him. On the other side, the Monroe family sat in quiet grief, their eyes full of pain but also determination, knowing that this was the moment they had waited for. For Rachel. For justice. The prosecution, led by an experienced attorney with a strong resolve, began presenting their case with methodical precision. The evidence was damning. DNA collected from the torn jeans found at Honeymoon Island matched Mark Doyle's, and his chilling confession, given in a cold, emotionless tone, described how he had attacked Rachel after she rejected his advances. But the hardest blow came from the witnesses who took the stand to confirm what had happened on that fateful night. But nothing could prepare the courtroom for what came next. The true emotional punch of the trial came when Rachel's mother, Linda Monroe, was called to testify. Linda stood before the court, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the witness stand. She looked out at the sea of people, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment she had been dreading, the moment when the pain of Rachel's loss would be relived in excruciating detail. But she knew she had to do this for Rachel. With a quiet voice that still held the weight of years of grief, Linda began to speak. I remember the first time I met Mark Doyle. He was a quiet man, just a neighbor, someone who always seemed helpful. He even helped us search for Rachel when she went missing. He was one of the first people to show up at the vigils, offering condolences. I thought he was a kind man, someone I could trust. Her voice faltered for a moment, but she steadied herself. I never imagined that he could hurt my daughter. But now, I know that he was the one who took her from me. The man who stood beside me in the search for Rachel was the one who took her life. It is a betrayal that I can never fully understand. Linda's words sent a wave of shock through the courtroom. Her testimony revealed not just the horror of the crime, but the depth of the betrayal. Mark Doyle hadn't just taken Rachel's life. He had taken the trust of a mother who had welcomed him into her home, who had shared her pain with him as they searched for answers. The cold, calculated nature of his actions hit everyone in the room like a punch to the gut. The prosecution's case was solid, but Linda's testimony was the moment that solidified Mark Doyle's fate. It wasn't just about the DNA. It wasn't just about the confession. It was about the trust he had shattered, the trust that had allowed him to be part of Rachel's family's most painful moments. As Linda spoke, the weight of her words became undeniable. I remember holding Rachel's hand, telling her everything would be okay. I remember kissing her goodnight the night before she disappeared. And now, I will never get to hold her hand again. I will never get to hear her laugh. I will never get to see her walk across that stage when she graduates. And all of it was stolen from me by someone who pretended to care. Her voice cracked with emotion, and the courtroom was silent. Mark Doyle's expression didn't change, but his silence spoke volumes. He sat there, emotionless as Linda's words tore through him, revealing him not as a neighbor or a volunteer, but as the man who had destroyed a family. The realization of his betrayal hit the Monroe family like a flood of overwhelming grief. Linda's voice wavered as she continued. I wish I could go back to that day when I thanked him for helping search for Rachel. I wish I had known then what I know now. I would have never trusted him. But now, all I have are memories of a man who was never who he seemed to be. Her final words left a lasting echo in the courtroom. Mark Doyle may have taken my daughter, but he will never take her memory. Rachel will always be in my heart. As Linda stepped down from the witness stand, the weight of what she had shared lingered in the air. The courtroom, once filled with whispers, was now silent. No one could deny the impact of her testimony. The woman who had lost everything had just given her final testimony in Rachel's honor. And in doing so, she had sealed Mark Doyle's fate. The courtroom sat still as Linda returned to her seat, her eyes filled with the pain of the years she had suffered, but also with a glimmer of hope that justice would soon be done. The trial would continue, but for many in the room, the emotional weight of Linda's testimony was enough to make them realize that this case was far more than just a legal battle. It was about the loss of a life, the breaking of trust, and the quest for justice that had been too long delayed. But the trial was far from over. There were still twists to come, and the final revelation was still waiting to unfold. As the trial continues, let us know what you think in the comments. What do you feel after hearing Linda's emotional testimony? Was justice served, or does it still feel incomplete? Hit the like button to support the Monroe family search for justice, and subscribe for more updates on this chilling case. The courtroom was packed, the tension thick in the air. The judge, his hands steady and voice firm, called for the final deliberation. The jury had deliberated for hours, the weight of the case heavy on their shoulders. Now the moment of truth had arrived. The silence in the courtroom felt deafening as the foreperson of the jury stood up, holding the verdict in her hands. Every eye in the room was on her, waiting for the words that would finally bring justice. We, the jury, find the defendant, Mark Doyle, guilty of first-degree murder. The words hung in the air like a final breath, releasing a flood of emotion. The Monroe family, who had sat through each painful day of the trial, remained motionless at first. Linda's face, though stoic, betrayed the years of anguish that had built up over the course of 15 long years. Daniel, beside her, clenched his hands tightly together, his fingers white from the pressure. Their eyes met, both filled with a mix of relief and sorrow. This was the justice they had fought for, but it couldn't take away the years they'd lost. It couldn't bring Rachel back. Outside the courtroom, the community of Clearwater, which had been bound together by the mystery of Rachel's disappearance, now found itself at the center of both closure and heartbreak. Justice had been served, but it wasn't a victory. Just a painful reminder of the loss that would never truly heal. Mark Doyle sat still, his face impassive as the verdict was read. There was no visible reaction, no remorse, no tears. He had already confessed. He had already admitted to taking Rachel's life. And now the jury had confirmed it. He was guilty. But his silence spoke volumes. It was a silence that echoed throughout the courtroom, a cold indifference to the grief he had caused. For the Monroe family, the verdict marked a closing chapter, but it didn't mark the end of their pain. Rachel would never come back. The years of searching, the unanswered questions, and the agony of not knowing where she was had shaped their lives in ways no verdict could undo. No matter how many years passed, Rachel's absence would always haunt them. Linda, her face etched with the years of mourning, reached for Daniel's hand, her fingers trembling as they gripped his. She didn't need words. The years of pain, of waiting for justice, of not knowing if Rachel was alive or dead, had all led to this moment. But it wasn't the end. It was never the end. The ache of missing their daughter, the emptiness of her absence, would remain in their hearts forever. Daniel looked at Linda, his eyes filled with sorrow, but also with a faint glimmer of peace. He knew they had fought hard for this. They had never given up. But peace was something that only existed in the dreams of those who had lost so much. Clearwater, once a place of peace and safety, was now forever marked by the tragedy of Rachel Monroe. The town would never be the same. The streets that once seemed so familiar now felt like a reminder of what had been lost. The memory of Rachel, a young woman full of promise, would live on in the hearts of everyone who had known her, but so would the memory of the betrayal. Mark Doyle had been their neighbor, their fellow search volunteer. He had been part of the community, someone who had offered condolences and help. But now, he was forever a part of the town's darkest history. The courthouse doors opened, and the Monroe family walked out into the bright sunlight, a strange contrast to the dark cloud that had loomed over them for so long. The cameras flashed as the reporters gathered, eager to hear their thoughts. But Linda and Daniel didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their eyes told the world everything they needed to know. The fight had been long, but it was far from over. The town of Clearwater would never forget Rachel Monroe. Her story had become more than just a missing persons case. It was a testament to the resilience of a family who never stopped searching for the truth. It was a reminder of the fragility of trust and how betrayal can shake even the most peaceful communities. But as the dust settled, the scars remained. Rachel's name would always be spoken with reverence in Clearwater. She would be remembered in memorials, in the quiet moments of reflection, and in the hearts of those who still carried the burden of what had happened to her. But the memory of the betrayal would remain too. Rachel's family, once trusting their neighbor Mark Doyle, now left with the bitter truth of his role in her death. And for the Monroes, the conclusion of the trial was not the end. It was a beginning of sorts. A new chapter where they could move forward, yes, but with a heavy heart. The town streets would continue to flow with life, but there would always be a shadow over Clearwater, reminding everyone of the price of trusting the wrong person. Before we close this chapter of Rachel's story, we want to hear from you. What do you think of the verdict? Was justice truly served in this case? And what do you think it teaches us about trust, justice, and the power of persistence? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more true crime stories that uncover hidden truths and shocking revelations. Share this story with someone who believes justice is always worth fighting for. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. As we reach the end of Rachel Monroe's story, we can't help but reflect on the profound lessons her case teaches us. It's a reminder that justice, while often delayed, will eventually come. The story of Rachel's disappearance and the years of waiting for answers highlights not only the resilience of a family that never gave up but also the power of persistence in the pursuit of truth. But beyond the resolution of this particular case, there's a deeper, more unsettling truth that we must acknowledge: the dangers of misplaced trust. In a small, peaceful community like Clearwater, it's easy to believe that the people around you are harmless, that your neighbors are always who they say they are. But the shocking truth of Mark Doyle's involvement in Rachel's death shows us that even the people we trust the most can harbor dark secrets. It's a harsh reality that no one, especially not Rachel's family, could have prepared for. And then there's the breakthrough in technology, the advancement of genetic genealogy, a technique that wasn't available when Rachel first went missing, but which ultimately provided the key to solving her case. This new technology didn't just offer closure for the Monroe family. It opened up the door to solving other cold cases, bringing hope to countless families who had lived in the shadows of uncertainty for years. Rachel's case is now a testament to the power of science, technology, and the unyielding determination of those who fight for justice. But it's not just about technology, it's also about the human element. It's about persistence, about never losing hope even when the world seems to have forgotten you. The Monroe family proved that no matter how long it takes, no matter how many years pass, the truth will eventually be revealed. Their journey shows us that justice may not always come when we want it, but if we continue to search for it, it will arrive when the time is right. It's a lesson in patience, in resilience, and in the power of not giving up, no matter how insurmountable the odds may seem. Before we wrap up, I want to express my gratitude to all of you amazing subscribers who've supported this channel. Your dedication helps keep these important stories alive, and it's because of you that we're able to continue sharing these powerful, sometimes heartbreaking, but always important stories. If you believe, like I do, that justice should never be forgotten, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss the next true crime story that uncovers even more shocking twists. And hey, if you know anyone who needs to hear the story, or if you believe in the power of persistence and technology in solving cold cases, please share this video with them. Let's continue spreading awareness because justice may be delayed, but together we'll always fight for it. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you in the next video, where we continue to uncover the untold stories of those who have fought for justice in the shadows of mystery.